So now we're going to talk about how to reduce stress in corporate America and why would you choose to reduce stress, how it relates to innovation. And Galina here is going to talk to us about it. Galina, take it away, do the introduction, tell us how.
Thank you, Luba. So, stress and innovation. So I have got into the field of like personal development and like personal, like kind of like peak performance long time ago. And I've studied all sorts of modalities and tools and skills. And the one that I found like really helpful on this topic, there's two teachings. There is the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, and then there's the work of Heart Math Institute. And I'm certified with both of them to deliver their work to companies and businesses and individuals. And what was found through Dr. Joe's kind of concatenation of that knowledge is that when we're in stress, our brain and body is out of balance. It's out of homeostasis. And all organisms in nature can tolerate short-term stress. You know, when a zebra is out running the lion, you know, gets all the energy to run, and then it's done, and then it's back to grazing. And humans are the only species that we can keep the stress response going after the event has passed, because we think about our problems, we rehash it in our minds, we gossip with other people. So we can
dream about it for days.
We dream about it, we complain about it. So we keep that stress response going, and that impacts our brain, it impacts our heart, impacts our nervous system, and it impacts our performance. So that's what I would like to dive into is, what does our brain have to do with that? What does our heart have to do with that? And what is all the research that we know that explains it?
Keep going. I can't wait.
Oh, okay.
So
Great.
I feel very strongly about, just in general, if I just can share with you for a few moments why it's so dear to my heart. So my dad had a stroke from an extremely stressful situation, not in corporate world in general, but I've watched him being extremely sick for over 25 years. And in general, then I've watched many other diseases come out of the very stressful situations. So when I wrote my first memoir, and I tried to look like, what is the main point that I want to get across, right? Because if you just share stories from your childhood, like it's not an extremely valuable read.
Right.
Right. And like by nature, I'm a very happy person. I'm like super chilled and I have a positive outlook on life. And when I was kind of going through my family and what they went through, to me, it's like stress causes so much bad things in life. And I just decided for myself, like, not to sweat the small stuff. And I remember there were certain moments, like in my experience in the corporate world, where people would be like pulling their hair out because there was no corporate alignment, because the priorities would be changing. And so to me, somebody would come and they would be like so angry, and I would think of my dad, right? And I'd be like, whatever, like, just chill, man. Like what's the big deal? Which of course is not a good way to get someone to calm down. But then all of this stressful, yeah, I know, sometimes, you know, we grow, like we learn different tools. But I remember just not feeling that great in an environment when there is a lot of stress and there's a lot of conflict. And then I thought about like innovation. Like when I would go for a walk and I would just be in my zen, right? I would come up with all kinds of ideas. I was full of enthusiasm. I can do this and that. I can write another book, because why not, right? I can create this course and that course. But if something stressed me out, there would be nothing coming out of this brain. And so the same thing in the corporate world. If we want to innovate, and in the context of, if I would to bring it back to the change management, there's a lot of creativity and there's a lot of innovation in the world of change management. And if we're stressed out, nothing much is going to happen. Right? We can't innovate much. And so that's why I personally care a lot about this topic. So I will give you the floor because you're going to solve it all for us now, right?
I'll share what I know. Hopefully, it will be
Okay.
helpful. So,
Sounds good.
I would want to like drop a little bit. You shared a little bit of personal story, and I'm like, oh, like it would make sense for me to share some of mine, so listeners can relate. So, peak performance, right? We want to be innovative. We want to get all these new ideas. We want to produce a lot. And there's a part of it that has to do with like proactive, like I want to go and I want to create and I want to do these things. But then there's all these things that like feel like they happen to us, that stress, the boss that screams at us, or the policy that changed and we're just pulling our hair, whatever, and then the skill become, how do we not let that thing get to us and get us off our balance? And for me, like I had a lot of practice in the last few years of how not to just really lose my balance. And I went through a lot. I went through, I was retired. I was financially free. I was living on the beach. Everything was great. And then one after another, all my investments folded and I lost everything. And I went into massive debt in a very like matter of short months. And it was not just debt to the banks, it was debt to friends and family. So for me, the emotion of guilt and shame and just kind of like this weight on my shoulders, I'm like, I know I need to create a solution, but there's nothing in there. Like I knew intuitively that like I have to get myself straight first before I can create.
And
And
you knew that you could create because you've created before.
Right. But like, it just felt like, I don't know if I can dig myself out of this hole. Like, how did I get there? How did I create it? But that's where like all these tools that I'm going to be like sharing with you today really helped. What you shared is completely true. And it's actually like, there's a biological reason behind it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about brainwaves and heart coherence. So brainwaves, it's, when we think thoughts, when we're going around our life in different states of mind, our brain produces, some electromagnetic frequencies that can be measured through EEG, those brain caps that you put on and you can measure what's going on in your brain. So there are different ranges of brainwave frequencies that, the science gave labels to just make sense of it, right? So there's beta brainwaves. Those are the brainwaves that we're in when we just walk around, do our things, work, make decisions, talk to people. That's when our attention is on the outer world primarily, and we're just dealing with whatever it is. And then alpha brainwaves, they're those slower brainwaves. That's the flow state. That's the creative state. That's the light meditative state. That's the state where we get new ideas and ahas. And that's the state we usually feel when we go on the beach and relax in the sunshine. That's, or if we meditate, we are in that brainwave state as well. And then there's theta, which is deep meditation state. You only get when you meditate for some time, or right before going to bed, or right after falling asleep. And then delta is the sleep, deep sleep, when you don't have any awareness of the outer world. So in beta, your awareness is on the outer world primarily. On alpha, you start getting more attention on the inner world, and you actually shift the way that you think from thinking in sentences and words to thinking in images and pictures and movies, like it becomes more visual. That's how you're shifting into the alpha. That's when sometimes people is like, I have a vision, like the vision. It's not a thought, it's a vision, right? So when we go to sleep, we go from beta to alpha to theta to delta. In the morning, when we wake up, it goes in the other direction. So now, when we are at work and we're doing our, business duties, we're usually in beta. And beta by itself is not all, bad. But there's 3 sub-ranges between beta because they are distinctly different. So they actually, separated them. So low beta is your normal functioning. You go around, you do things, you talk to people, you're more like, you're pretty relaxed. You're just attending to what's needed. If something happens that demands a little bit more of your attention, let's say you need to present to the VP, or you need to take a test at a university, or you're about to go on stage, you have this little bit of like there's like a little bit of, extra energy. You're a little bit more vigilant, you're paying attention to that thing, your nervous system is a little bit aroused. And that's not bad stress. That's what we call eustress or good stress. That's something that you actually, when you go through those experiences, when we go out of our comfort zone, we feel that every time. It's like the butterflies in the sun, whatever it is.
Exciting, actually.
Exciting, yes. So, and once you start, You go on stage, and after the first couple minutes, like, you're good, your nervous system recalibrated, and now you actually have bigger capacity to handle those uncomfortable states, right? But the high beta, that's where the danger lies. So high beta is when we're in high stress. That's when, and a few things happen when we are there, and I'm going to tie it to innovation, how those two things just cannot go together biologically. So when we're in high beta, our nervous system is very aroused. The part of our brain that have to do with actually logical reasoning and decision making gets actually turned down. So, when you have an argument with a spouse and it's like, where did the logic go? Actually, it was turned off, like it was not there. So when we are in that high beta state, we are in what's called the sympathetic nervous system activation. So the sympathetic nervous system is a fight or flight nervous system. That's where we are ready to like deal with danger or perceived danger. And parasympathetic system has to do with growth and repair. So when we are in stress and we cannot turn it off, we cannot create, we cannot change, we cannot collaborate very well. Why? Because when we are in that survival state, biologically, we're focused on self-survival. We focused on making sure we are okay. That's why when they announce layoffs, people don't think about how they can help the company. They think about what I'm going to do with myself, right? So innovation that requires group collaboration cannot happen there, because collaboration cannot happen in high beta. It's very hard. Like, you can still talk to each other, but everybody's still having their own agendas in their heads, right? It's a different focus. And alpha or low level beta, that's where we want to be for innovation, because that's when we can actually have access to the parts of our brain and to the state that have to do with new ideas and creative solutions. And in stress, it just cannot happen. The whole point of the stress response is to make sure you survive the danger. Make sure,
so just so I want to make sure it's very clear and get it recorded. And so for companies to innovate, they should take everyone to Hawaii or Bahamas or some other very relaxing space, right? Like, that's the only way that's what I heard. I don't know.
I wouldn't say that's the only way. And that's why, we teach the trainings that we teach, is we give people the tools to self-regulate. So what can people do to get out of high beta into alpha? One way is, yes, to go to the beach. Absolutely helps. Why? Because when we go to the outside nature space and we have this kind of like vast sky and like water, when we're in high stress, our brain goes in what's called narrow focus. When we focused on that problem, that thing, that person, we're very we don't put like blinders on. We just need to pay attention to that thing and everything else goes away. To slow our brain waves down, we need to do the opposite, which is open focus. And that's what Dr. Joe, in thousands of brain scans that he did, they measured that when people do the open focus, which means instead of focusing on specific thing, you focus on the space. And it could be around when you go for a walk, or it could be that you just sit down and you close your eyes and you focus on the space around your body. You just focus on it. Don't do anything. You don't try to change anything. You just disperse your focus and start sensing, because when we're sensing, we cannot think. And when we're sensing and not thinking, it slows down our brainwaves. So that's something people can do, now. You can watch this video and you can go and try it. Like, you're stressed. I do it all the time when I can't fall asleep at night because there's too many thoughts in my head. I'm like, oh yeah, open focus. And I just do it for like 2 to 5 minutes and it quiets down. So that's one thing. That's one thing they can do.
Okay.
So that's why, if the environment is as such that people are constantly stressed and they're reacting in high beta, brain response, they can't be in low beta and they cannot be in alpha. So they can't really create and innovate. So the outer environment, the work environment, has to do with it, a lot to do with it, of course. But it's also, people are not just victims to the environment. I tend to choose the belief that I'm the creator of my life and I'm creator of my experience. So even when that thing happens outside of me, it's not that thing that's the stress to me. It's how I respond to that thing. How do I think about that thing, that event, that person? And then that thought then produces a feeling, and there's a whole cocktail of chemicals, how it happens biologically. So the same event, you can respond in a way that produces a stress response, or you can respond in a way that's going to be more constructive. And that's something that's trainable. That's the skills. That's the skills of adaptability, that you can still have the same stuff happening, but you choose not to be stressed and you train yourself to be that resilient. So you can stay in the balanced state, low beta state or alpha state, while, there's all this shit flying around.
This is also covered in emotional intelligence as well, because those triggers, how we react to something.
Right.
I mean, I've seen people having a very difficult time. Like, that's actually effort. So not just self-awareness, because you can be self-aware and not care. You can say,
Yeah.
whatever. Like, that's how I react, and you either deal with it yourself, right? Like, it's your problem, not mine, or you start working on yourself. It's not an easy one, but it's doable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just a habit. Like, we're only the way that we are because of a habit, because of how we were raised and our mindset of our parents and our environment. So any change takes energy, because you need to stop doing things the old way. That takes energy, and it takes repetition. But if it's something that you want for yourself, because you actually want to feel more happy, more relaxed, have more joy out of life, then there are all the tools and skills these days that you can learn to do it.
All right. Well, I'll finish with the line that I used in my memoir and at a speech recently, which is, "We cannot control what life throws our way, but we can control the actions we take, right? And so we can choose to either be the way we are and just say whatever, um, or we can choose to work on ourselves." That's fascinating, because I'm not a science person. I could only like explain my feelings and share my experiences when I was successful versus not so much. But I love how you can put the science towards everything that I experience every day. And I'm a strong believer in reducing stress. Like,
Yeah.
just stress is just not a cool thing.
No. And do we have a few minutes? Can I share a bit more
Sure,
about
yes,
HeartMath?
please.
So HeartMath Institute that I mentioned, they're a nonprofit that's been around for 20 plus years, and they spent their all this time studying the science of heart and heart coherence, and how can, like, their question is like, how can it be measured and how can it be improved, right? So they invented the device. Let me see if it's here. Like,
So
they
we're
invented.
back to data-driven decision making, right? If you can
Yes,
measure it.
exactly. Data. So this one is called Inner Balance. You just attach it to your earlobe, and then this syncs through Bluetooth to your phone, and you have an app on your phone. And there are different options for laptops and stuff like that. But basically what that does, it allows you to measure your heart coherence real time. And what is heart coherence? When we are in certain states, our heart is either beating in kind of like very harmonious patterns, or it's hectic, right? And it correlates to the stress response and like the balanced nervous system. So the coherence score, or like the level of coherence, kind of correlates of, on the low scores, like you're really stressed and you're really hectic. And on the high scores, you're actually very balanced. And it's a range. It's not like you're on, you're off. Like they're like, and they have so they measure what's called heart rate variability, which I'm not going to go into science because that'll take a long time. But it allows you to measure your heart rhythms and how they change from beat to beat. And it draws this beautiful line on the screen. And when it's incoherent, the line is all kind of sharp and riggedy. And when it's coherent, it's just this beautiful kind of wavy thing. And so the device allows you to measure it. So you can see real time if you're like sitting, like I sometimes put it on when I'm driving and I want to see, can I keep my calm, getting around traffic? Or I measured it when I meditate, or I have like a 5-minute break between the meetings and I'm like, oh, I wonder how I'm at now. It's like, oh, I'm not very high. And I just do a few exercises and it brings it back to balance. So that's the second part of HeartMath Institute kind of commitment, intention, vision, is how can it be improved? Right? What can people do to increase their heart coherence? Not just in the moment of like something got stressful and you got back to balance, but as a baseline. So they've done a lot of research of how do you re-baseline. So people with low coherence, they are more prone to anxiety feelings and worrying feelings. And people who train themselves to become more coherent, their baseline shifts more to peace and calm and belief that everything is going to be okay. So even if they're off, they come back faster. And overall their experience of life is much more positive. It also is connected to so many like biological, obviously, research, what that does to your health, what that does to your energy levels. And they talk about emotions, how if there's are emotions that, what we call negative, they're actually draining your energy. And if you think of your energy as a battery, if you're draining and draining and draining and you're not replenishing, you're going to burn out. So then the question becomes, how do you recognize when you're draining? And what can you do to replenish the positive tank so you can keep the balance, or keep the battery charged highly so you can handle more? So HeartMath, like, they definitely have a lot of, they have, like, for those of you like data geeks, like, go to their website, heartmath.org. They have a lot of data, research articles. They tested all these things, and they provided these trainings to people who have high stress work environments, like police officers and doctors, and then they see what happens if a police officer goes into a shooting and does nothing, and what happens to their heart rate for the rest of the day, versus what happens if they went to the shooting, they went back, they did a little bit of heart breathing exercise, and how it brings them back to balance almost instantly, and then the rest of their day is good. So when we talk about emotional intelligence, one of the things that come to my mind is refractory period, right? Like, when you feel off, like, of course, we all humans, we all feel all sorts of emotions. But the question is, like, how long are you going to feel it? How long are you going to react? Can you shorten that emotional reaction? And that becomes part of the emotional intelligence. And that also becomes the part of the skills that you can train.
Oh, this is absolutely fascinating. And again, it's all about, so first of all, data. I love it when it's data, because sometimes we're just really so not self-aware.
Yep.
I will just give you one more story, and then we'll just wrap it up, because it's the story from a very early time in my career. And I remember I thought that I am this most calm, chilled person. Like, nothing can get to me. Like, I was famous, actually, still am in the corporate world. Like, I'm just chilled. Like, I just, I don't stress out. And so I got a job. I decided I was developing, and then I decided to get closer to the customer. And I went to work to a customer support organization. And for 6 months, they sent me to various trainings. And so I go to this one training, and it's customer support. So they train you how to speak with customers. And they did this exercise. I still have the little audio cassette. It was that far back. It was like an audio tape. And so they had this audio recorder, and they put the tape in, and we paired up. And the job of the person who was partnering with you, their job was to piss you off, like, to really, like, drive you nuts. And I rolled up my sleeve. I'm like, there's nothing you can do to me. And so, but they purposefully, right, tried to just, yes, ma'am, I understand. I understand your concern. Yes. And so they were, of course, complaining about something. And as a customer support representative, I was supposed to stay all calm and solve their problem. This is where the biggest aha moment was. So we stopped the recording, and they asked us, how did you feel it went? And I said, oh, I was all calm. And then they smiled, because apparently I wasn't the first one with, unawareness. And they played it back for me. They played back my voice. So I thought I was so calm. What I heard, it was, yes. So by the fifth time, it was, yes, I understand your problem. I was completely not self-aware. I thought the whole time I was so calm, and I sounded so pissed off, because I was pissed off. I just thought I was hiding it very well, but I really wasn't. So it was, to me, I think was the first time when I realized what we think we sound like, or like, unless you actually get that honest feedback from someone, and unless you're self-aware, and unless you do measure things, you might just not know.
Yeah. And Luba, like, you're the kind of individual, and I think many of the people are like that, like, especially for those of us raised in certain countries, like, you have to put yourself together and deal with whatever the heck is out there, because that's what you got to do to survive, right? So you can on the outside, deliver, do whatever. It does not mean we don't feel the stress inside. And that's the stress that, hurts our health and our productivity. So even if we can keep the interface going, there's another layer of wellness, which is like what's going on inside. Even if nobody else sees the impacts of it, we do. And we're the ones who will experience the consequences of it if we don't do anything about it.
And we don't want the consequences, right?
No.
All right. Well, this was quite fascinating, I have to say. I think we can talk for hours and hours and hours, but we need to wrap it up. Thank you so very much. The audience got some real tips and tricks, right? How to deal with stress. But most importantly, the purpose of this conversation was for self-awareness. Just kind of be mindful that there are tools out there to measure your stress level, and be mindful of the fact that when you are stressed out, at least set the right expectations, right? Like you can't innovate and you can't come up with creative ideas when you're stressed out. So you can keep being stressed out if that works for you, or look for ways to reduce that stress. And I think we'll wrap it up. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So much fun. Such a pleasure.